There we go. Awesome. All right. This session is now being recorded. We are official. Thank you, Aishwarya, for that. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today, we're going to be doing a webinar called The Various Versions of Adobe ColdFusion. My name is Mark Takata, and I am the Adobe ColdFusion technical evangelist. But before I start, I wanted to give you all a little bit of an overview of, excuse me, of this view that you're seeing here. We're in a product called Adobe Connect. So I set this up in this particular layout. Everything is customizable. All the pods are customizable. And the nice thing is, whenever I use this, I can actually see everything that you all do. So for the most part, it's having some issues with the preview of my screen in the upper left, but that's okay. So you'll note that there's a chat, which is great if you want to chat to everyone and just kind of talk amongst yourselves. Feel free to do so. I would ask if you have specific questions for me that you would like me to answer. There is a Q&A pod there, kind of in the lower center, which is specifically for that. And the reason that I really prefer to use that is, for one, it makes it easier to collate these questions and share them with the team later. But also, questions don't end up getting lost in the weeds. So if you could please use that to ask technical or other questions regarding Adobe ColdFusion, please do so. I'd also like to add, I'm doing a webinar today at 10, but I'm also doing another talk later today at 1 p.m. Hawaii time, which is 4 p.m. PST, with the Hawaii ColdFusion user group. I'm doing a talk, which is my top 10 issues that you might run into when moving to a newer version of ColdFusion. I thought it actually would be a nice little tie-in. Here's the versions of ColdFusion, and then we're going to talk about moving code up and all the other things. It's a really fun talk. It's pretty funny because I go into detail on like a lot of just sort of the horrors that I've seen over time. So anyway, so just a brief introduction to me. I've been a developer for over 20 years. I know 13 programming languages and frameworks. I have professional experience in all of them. Adobe hired me last year. It's actually almost 1 year to the day here in a few days. So that's pretty awesome and fun. And I've been using ColdFusion for over 20 years. It's one of my, it was like my first actual programming language that I picked up. I actually have more experience, longer experience in it than JavaScript, if you could believe that. So, so today we're going to be talking about the differences in the various versions of ColdFusion. But I did want to sort of start off by talking about some of the things that we won't be talking about, like some of the things that we're not going to be focusing on. I was asked to make sure that I sort of specify this stuff. So, I'm not really going to be talking about licensing, just because it's a really complex thing. You could go on for hours, and really when it comes down to it, occasionally it's easy, but often it's just dependent on whatever, whatever your setup is, where you are, how many cores, blah, 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 blah. So all that, I'm not going to be looking at that. Also, I'm talking about Adobe ColdFusion today. So there are obviously other frameworks out there, open source frameworks, other CFML engines out there. I'm not going to be covering those. We're just going to be talking about specifically the versions of Adobe ColdFusion. And we're specifically going to be talking about current versions. So really the things I'm going to say here apply to 2021 mostly, as well as some things in 2018. So you might say, oh, wait, but in whatever, in 11, this was a difference between the two. Well, yeah, probably was. We have changed some things. We've actually taken some things and applied them to both versions. So we'll be doing that. And the last thing is that we're not going to be talking about how to use ColdFusion for free. All right. Now that my boss is out of the room. Let's talk about ways to use ColdFusion for free. All right. So starting off, and by the way, the reason that this is in a talk about the various versions of ColdFusion is that this is actually really important to to the versions. Like different versions have different use cases, and they have different ways of paying for it and trials and things like that. And it's pretty important for you to realize like what you're using and what you're doing with whatever version you happen to be using. So the first thing to look at is the trial edition that you will install locally. And to get that, it's really easy. If you go to adobe.com, search for ColdFusion, there's going to be a try now button. Like if you literally go to adobe.com and then in the search type Adobe ColdFusion, in the search bar, there's a button that says try now. And if you click that, you will get this page that you're seeing in the upper left, start your 30-day free trial. So this is for a version of ColdFusion that you will install locally. And what's important to understand here is this is an enterprise, right? So you'll be trying out a fully functioning enterprise version. And there's multiple ways to download this to try it out. So this is also something I definitely get in there and use these features. So there's a full install, which is, like 1.5 gigs or some obscene number, because it includes all the packages, all the stuff, like every single thing, every driver, every possible thing you could do with ColdFusion, which is like the old school way that we used to offer it. However, if you go into that drop down and go one up from the default, which is the high one, you'll notice that there's a light installer. And the light installer still installs enterprise, but it installs it with no packages except for the admin. So it's really, really important to know. So what this lets you do is it lets you feel how light and efficient ColdFusion can be if you're not just loading every single thing, and everything in the kitchen sink it to memory. It's one of the great features of ColdFusion 2021. It's brand new with that release. And I think a lot of people don't really give it much thought that it does actually save you on memory and things like that. It definitely helps you have a leaner, meaner install, especially if you're moving into like Docker containers and things like that. So give that one a try. Now keep in mind that is for local install, right? That's your trial for local install. Now, if you want to be in the cloud, there's a really, really super easy way to try out ColdFusion for free in the cloud. And that's by using the AMI free trial. So super easy to get to. You just go to, AWS. Obviously, you have to have an account with AWS, yada, yada. And you'll search for ColdFusion 2021. They do have AMIs, by the way, for 2018 on Windows, 2018 on Linux. I believe it's on Ubuntu. They have a lockdown AMI for 2018. They don't currently have that for 2021, but for 2021, they do have it on Linux and on Windows. There's a 30-day free trial with them, right? So if you start today, any usage that you use in the next 30 days, they won't charge you for. Any usage past that will be charged based on their hourly rate, which is like 50 cents an hour or something like that, right? And you can shut down your machine and not get charged. So it's actually kind of neat. Also, it's you have to also consider the infrastructure costs there, of course, right? Because you're on AWS. Something that we changed maybe 5 months ago, something like that, is you used to have to pay for some machine. Like the minimum that was allowable to install on was like an M5, which I think was, I don't know, 15 cents or 10 cents an hour or something like that. We now support you installing onto a free tier machine. So if you're new to AWS, you get on the free tier, the 1-year free tier on the low end ECS machines, you can actually get in there, and I think it's a T1 micro or something like that. T2 micro. You can get in on a T2 micro, and I believe it's free to run that for a year, something like that. I mean, don't quote me on that. You got to go to AWS and figure that out. But even if you are paying for it, I should note, it's 0.016 cent. So it's like 1.6 cents per hour. So yeah, pretty good there. Next is the developer edition. Now, when you were reading all the instructions on, come here, Mark, talk about, the difference between standard. Well, it was like the versions, right? And you think, oh, standard enterprise. Well, there's actually more than just those versions, right? You've got the developer edition also, and the developer edition has some limits to it, but it is free like forever. Like it's free for you to use. You're not supposed to put it into a production environment, of course, and it does have some limits on the way that it functions, right? You can't hit it with more than I think 2 IPs plus your local host. So it's obviously not, it's not a server. It's not to be used in production to serve up production code to people. But if you're a developer, you can absolutely use it to test locally. You can do all that locally, which is really great. Now, here's the fun one, and here's the one that I think people are going to go a little crazy over, and I'm super excited. We offer free educational copies of standard for non-production use. Okay, so what does that mean? That is the wrong thing. So if you go to that website there, ColdFusion Standard FAQ, and you scroll down, so this is something that we offer because we want to, obviously we want people to use ColdFusion, but we really want to support education. We want people to learn how to program, and we'd love to have them learn to program in ColdFusion. So this is a program that's been around a while, and it was updated and is still valid here for 2021. And essentially what you do is you contact us at Adobe ColdFusion at adobe.com, and you attach a copy of your proof that you either work for, are a faculty, or a student in an educational facility, right? So if you're a student currently attending UC Davis, you send us a copy of your current student ID, and you send it from your EDU email. And then within 2 weeks, we will email you a code to update your trial version to standard. And that code is like good. It's like a perpetual code. Like you now have this for use, for personal use only. And that's just to be really clear. Like you can't host a website off of this. You can't like start a small business using this version. It's not what this is for. This is really for people to learn how to use ColdFusion. But it's kind of exciting. I mean, it is a full-blown version that you can install and use, and it's free. If you are an educator that wants to set up, for example, a lab, like a computing lab with ColdFusion installed on there, you can actually request up to 30 serial numbers to get them installed. So this is a great program. I feel like I really want more people leveraging this. If you are coming in here from education, please reach out. My email is going to be at the end. If you have questions about this, please reach out. We really want to make sure people are using this because it's really great. And then the last free way to use Adobe ColdFusion is CFFiddle. So CFFiddle is an online kind of like test bed. You can go in there, you can code in it. It's obviously limited in some ways. You can't run a website off of it or anything like that. But if you're trying to learn and you want to test things out, maybe you want to test different code across different engines, because it does support, I believe, 2018 and 2021 right now, newest versions. You can go on there and try that out. Okay, so that's free. What about cheap? So I kind of covered this a little bit already in some ways, but the first one, and this is something that I really, really want people to consider when they're thinking about using ColdFusion, is there are hosted solutions out there that allow you to use, most of the time, Enterprise, ColdFusion Enterprise, and they start at like $6.99 a month. So if you haven't like hosted with a ColdFusion host in whatever 10 years or even 5 years, right? And you remember back in the day, oh yeah, it's $45 a month or something like that to have ColdFusion sitting on there and being used. Yeah, give them another try, because the prices have precipitously dropped. This is now the cheapest possible way to get in and use ColdFusion in a professional sense, where you could run a website off of it and be in license agreement and all that. So definitely check those out. If you have questions about who our hosts are that support ColdFusion, please give me an email, and I can send you out a list. We also have some partner pages on Adobe that talk about who our hosting partners are. The second way of using ColdFusion, semi cheap, this kind of depends on what you're doing with it, is when you spin up that AMI from our partner Coalesce, you can turn it off, and it literally is done on a 50 cent per hour plus infrastructure charges, which are also an hour. So, and I do this myself, actually. I go in there, I have the setup, web hosting, which was huge. CF host really became expensive. Oh, I didn't know that, actually. So yeah, so someone just mentioned in the Q&A that that HostTech offers a reseller account, and that is true. That's actually pretty awesome. So I use this reseller account myself, and essentially you pay whatever it is, 25, 30 something dollars, and they let you kind of become a reseller of ColdFusion products. So if you run your own company that creates sites for people, you can actually use that and then resell the service to them at whatever. I should also mention, though, that this company HostTech, which is one of our partners, they're the ones that recently had the $6.99 a month for personal site thing going, which, and I'm sure there's like, you have to pay a year ahead or whatever. I mean, obviously I don't work for them. They're a partner. Obviously they're a trusted partner. And we do send people to them as well as to other hosting solutions. But if you want to get in cheap on ColdFusion and get something spun up, that's a good way to go. So anyway, so that's AMI on AWS. So as you notice, there's a lot of versions of ColdFusion, maybe too many, right? I mean, you've got trial, local, which is very different from the trial cloud, as you notice. And something that I need to point out, like, this is very, very important. When you install trial locally on your machine, when the 30 days is done, it converts to developer mode. Okay, so it basically goes from being pretty much a full-featured 30-day version of enterprise, and then it automatically by itself downgrades itself. If it hasn't gotten a license key, it downgrades itself to developer. On the cloud, in the AMI, after 30 days, it begins charging you. So don't make that mistake. You want to make sure, if you're using the AMI and you want to shut it down or lower your costs, or you're just doing it to try it out and see what all this cloud stuff is all about, please keep an eye on that stuff, because I don't want anybody to get any crazy bad experiences with, I thought it was going to downgrade itself and go away, or I thought after 30 days it would just stop, whatever. Yeah, no. So then there's standard, there's enterprise, and then there's ColdFusion Super Ultra. No, just kidding. No, we don't have that one yet. Give me a minute. I'm working on that one. So when you're talking about choosing one of these to use and to try out and to maybe run your business on, you really have to think more about your use cases, how you're going to use it, versus capability. Because as I'll talk about in a really brief moment here, the differences between the versions are actually not that big. And by the way, I have to point out here, I realized as I was putting together a lot of the slides for this and the information for this, that Charlie Earhart, one of the great ColdFusion speakers in our community, actually did a talk like this, I think in 2019, maybe. So he did it a few years ago. And when he went through, I think he found something like 20 different differences between standard and enterprise. And he kind of went straight down the line and dove in real deep. I'm not going to be diving in as deep. I'll try to point out things that are like really critical and important to turning your business. But I think what you'll discover is, if you need a particular thing in enterprise, the likelihood is that you'll need at least a couple of those things from enterprise. Like, that's probably going to be something that you'll run into, right? It's not just going to be like, oh man, I wish enterprise had just one thing. I mean, maybe it will, and you know, if that happens, let us know, right? We'd love to know if you're like you'd love one thing from enterprise, right? Like, what's that thing? What would you like to do? So please, by the way, put that in the chat pod or in the Q&A if you have suggestions or questions about things you'd love to see added, for example, to like standard. But really what it comes down to is, if you're a dev, if you're a programmer, use developer. It will handle the vast majority of what you need. It's free. You can run it anywhere. You can install it in the cloud if you want, whatever. One use case actually that I did for a long time that works awesome is when I worked for companies. I've been remote for a really long time. What we would do is we'd set up a VM for me up in the cloud somewhere, and I would install all of my stuff in the cloud in the same sort of environment as my final, as you know, the production environment was, right? So I worked in a place where we did Azure, and so I had an Azure VM, and I connected to Azure SQL from my Azure VM. Everything was running up in the cloud. So for me, what it meant was I could work very much in the same type of environment as my code would finally end up living in. Now, is that totally necessary? Clearly, no. You could put it on your local machine or your local computer or whatever the heck you want to do. You could do that. For me, I just felt like it lowered some of the barriers to being able to move stuff around. Being inside of Azure also made CI/CD a little bit easier to move things around. There were, I mean, obviously you can always FTP things if you really needed to, but that way you don't need to do that. Then standard, generally speaking, is for like the small businesses, some maybe smaller education, things that are doing work. If you think of it in like vehicle terms, it's like, you know, the half-ton pickup, right? You can do work with it, and it can support a whole shop, and they work super hard and they're super effective. You know, you can tow something. Enterprise is for the big stuff. Enterprise is, you know, the 1 ton, the big diesel, the thing that needs to tow, you know, 18,000 pounds, and really is out there like being hit hard all the time, right? So if you have, maybe if you're doing like a website on one class and maybe a few hundred people hit it throughout the day, okay, you don't really need a big solution. If you're someone like a university that whenever registration comes, you have 30,000 people all wanting to get into classes in the first 5 seconds, you're gonna need something that can handle that. Like, that would be a very poor use case for standard. You'd get flattened by that, because you wouldn't be able to set up the architecture that supports that level around it. That's not what standard is built for. So that's where enterprise is really good for. So before we get into the real differences, what are the similarities? Because this is something that comes up sometimes, that people are like, oh, well, I don't want to use that because it doesn't have this capability, or you know, it's not as performant or something like that. So the first thing to understand, all of these versions, they all sit on the same engine, right? They all sit on top of Tomcat. They all sit on the same Java stuff. They all compile to the same Java bytecode at the end of the day, full stop. So if you were to set up standard or dev or whatever, and enterprise on the same stuff, like on the same hardware, and hit them with like a normal load, just out of the box default settings on everything, the performance between all of them pretty much identical, right? Where of course you get advantages, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, is there are like more tuning, more like architectural support things that you can add to enterprise. But at the end of the day, for the vast majority of people who are just doing kind of like the work, you know, it's the same engine. They all run on the same thing. And also, they all have the same like language features, all the cool new stuff that we brought in with 2021. All of the all the member functions that we've been adding since, I think, 2016, right? CF script, right? And I'll talk about that a little bit. It is supported on both. These are all things that you can get on both engines, which is nice because when you move from one to the other, you don't have to like, oh no, I have to refactor my code because I'm going to enterprise. No, you don't have to deal with that. You don't have to worry about that. It all just works. As I mentioned, multiple deployment methods. So this is again another thing. So like you can run both of these on Windows. You can run them on Linux. They'll work in Docker containers. They all pretty much, it's all kind of the same thing. Now, are there licensing issues? Yeah, okay. Yeah, there might be some licensing issues with some of the items there. But generally speaking, you can pretty much put these things anywhere. If enterprise can do it, you can put dev there. Like, they're all the same. Performance is the same except for select items, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Platforms, again, they all kind of run on the same things. I think someone actually got, I think this was Lucy, but I think someone ran Lucy on a Raspberry Pi. I think Brad Wood managed to run. We don't support that yet, but maybe you should work on it. Again, tags and script. And this came up the other day. Someone was wanting to upgrade to 2021, and they were moving from like 9 standard to enterprise 2021, and they were like, oh well, we're worried we're gonna have to like recode the whole application, 50,000 lines of code. And no, everything, it's they were all tag based. It was kind of old school, which, by the way, I still use some tags. I still love some tags. I just can't. I can't get myself away from using things like CF query. It's just so easy and so fast when I'm trying to do rapid application development. But you won't have to change if you move from one to the other. So that's actually a nice thing. Both have document services. So what do I mean by document services? So conversion of things to PDF. Both can do that. Generating PDFs from just raw code, like making reports that you code up yourself. Both support that, right? Now, there's some, and I shouldn't say except there's some differences in the way that you end up being able to do that, and there's one very specific kind of niche limitation that standard has that enterprise doesn't have when you're talking about documents. But again, if you're talking about oh, I want to be able to take this page and print it as a PDF and just generate a PDF right out of the browser, or take this data table and convert it to Excel right out of the browser. Both can do that. Modularity. So this is another thing. This is new with 2021. As I mentioned, we're really going to be talking mostly about 2021 here. But whether you're using standard or whether you're using enterprise, you still can do the fun, install 147 meg core and then add packages, right? So if you need to, I don't know, have Mongo and PDF and all that, you can go in there and you can sit and either use the CLI, which I'll talk about a little bit, or you can use the administrator, which also, by the way, the administrator, which is a great, super powerful and amazing tool, that also is available on both, right? And you can use that to add the packages that you need, update things as needed, all that. Redis session storage. That's another thing that is available across both of them. And that's a little bit of a specialized requirement. We actually had a client recently that was trying to move from using session storage locally to Redis, and you can do that for a number of reasons. If you're doing if you're doing like F5, like third-party load balancing or something like that, sometimes you want to be able to move the sessions in different places. I don't really recommend using it with standard necessarily, because the other limits start to get in the way, and there might be licensing issues, but it does actually support it. And I did use this myself, by the way, and I used Redis Cloud, which is a thing that exists and is free for the most part. I think it supports like 200 million read writes for free every month, except something to note: if you use that and you don't actually spin it up for a while, it goes cold. and then when you try and log in, it breaks ColdFusion because all of your security stuff that was in there is trying to write to something that doesn't exist. So yeah, don't do that. I had to learn that the hard way. And the final thing here in what's the same on this page is cars. I don't mean the four-wheeled version. I mean ColdFusion Archives. This was actually added, I believe, since 2016, maybe since 2011, something like that. It's been around for a little bit, but some people still don't realize that you can save a ColdFusion archive, which is basically a snapshot of your ColdFusion server. You can save that to a car and then transfer it to another machine for deployment or whatever, like a backup or something along those lines. And going along with that, there's a new tool that came out, I think a couple of years ago, called CFSetup. And you can use that to set up this new server and get everything spun up and working correctly. So that's definitely awesome. What else? So all the cool cloud stuff that's kind of started in 2018 and kept going in 2021, that's the same across both of them. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about storage. So a lot of this is multi-cloud, by the way, which means that whether you're using S3 or Azure Blob, right, you're using the same code in your actual CFML. You're connecting to it differently. You're creating these objects with different information because obviously Azure is not AWS. They're different. But when you're using it internally, in a lot of cases in here, your code is going to be the same for getting access to those storage pieces. In 2021, we added some NoSQL database access object creation utilities inside of admin. So for what do I mean by that? So for example, I can create a DynamoDB object and then use that inside of my code. Why is that cool? So the reason that that's cool is if you're in an environment where you have, architects, leads, all that, maybe you have some junior developers, you want to practice the concept of least necessary access to things, right? If someone is writing a website and all they need to do is pull some data and put it to the screen, they probably should not have, admin rights necessarily to the database or even know those permissions necessarily. That's a good way of going about things. However, usually when you're doing stuff inside of your code, that'll be in your, maybe some of your access stuff will be set up in, like a secret or something, which is something that these guys could potentially, if they were malicious, they could pull down and use it to access the database. In the way that this works in ColdFusion in the admin is you would have the administrator access limited only to the higher level devs, and they could create these objects and give the name to the devs, and then those devs would be able to leverage them for whatever use cases they need. And the limitations on the access can be built into the actual objects themselves, right? You can do this with DSNs as well. I'll give you a really good example of when that was useful. At a university that I worked at, they ran an Oracle database for pretty much every single thing under the sun. And the Oracle team was really, really afraid of allowing people almost any kind of access to their tables, to their stuff. What they would do is they say, well, tell us what you need and we'll write you a view, and then you can leverage that view. And they could kind of like lock that view down and limit it from being able to damage anything else. The problem is it took 5 to 6 weeks for that view to get through whatever process they had and become available. It's totally impossible to have an agile development methodology running when it takes 6 weeks. So these guys would not do that. They'd have their own databases, and it was really ugly. So I showed up, and when I talked to the Oracle team, I said, well, what is the problem, right? Like why are you limiting them? Well, the problem was they were afraid of things getting locked up. They were afraid of people writing to tables that they were not allowed to write to. And if people just had access, then they could potentially create like a transaction lock on something and screw someone else up. So I said, well, why don't we just create these data sources inside of admin in a protected space where only, maybe they could even be there when these are created, that only have, for example, read access, because a lot of these were lookup tables. They're going out, they're looking up what a particular date and time is for a class, for example, right? Why don't we just do that? And they were perfectly happy with it, and it solved a problem basically through technology that had been there for years at this point, and it caused all kinds of like technical debt to accrue and all that. So this is actually a really good pattern to leverage inside of admin. Actually, like use the administrator's object creation, and you can do this for Lambda objects, by the way. RDS, NoSQL, you can create storage objects this way and leverage that. Simple email service objects, like all of these things are available. Also SAML, and that's another thing that's the same between them, is single sign-on. You can create SAML objects and then leverage those to get single sign-on for authentication into your stuff. So really, really cool stuff. Email services. Now, this is different than the simple Amazon email service or Amazon simple email service. This is like literally leveraging, Outlook like Exchange. This is sending SMTP email like, oh, something broke in my site, I need to send an email, or someone's logging into my site, I need to have the server send an email. Both of them can do that. So standard and enterprise both have those capabilities. They're a little bit different in how they're implemented, which I'll talk about later. I should note, by the way, all of the cloud things are identical across both things. So any limitations that you see on something that's not one of those, that's not going to apply to any of them. ORM, so object relational mapping. This is a way to set up a database where you're kind of setting it up like ahead of time and then like leveraging this tooling to gain access to things without having to really write like SQL statements and joins and things like that. It's really powerful. It takes a little bit of setup, and I don't know, I never really got into it. Sorry. I'm a SQL guy, but I know people who absolutely adore it and love it, and it is available on both versions. The CLI and the read eval print loop or REPL, those have been inside of the product for a while. Every single version, we've added a little tiny bit of new feature to that. And with 2021, we actually added an entire new CLI. Don't ask me why we didn't roll it into the old CLI, because I don't know. I wasn't there when that decision was made. But there is a package management command line interface that you can go in there, and you can actually do really cool things. Like you can tell it to scan your code and tell you which packages are needed for a particular set of code. It's awesome. Now, it won't add it automatically or anything like that. We're working on that. But it gives you the idea of like, oh, okay, like cool. So I'm doing things that are calling like PDF, or I'm calling this, or I'm doing that. And sometimes you'll go, wait, why is it trying to load the SOAP? I think it's called Access. Like, why is it trying to load the SOAP thing? You might even find some code in there that maybe shouldn't be in there. Whether it's a security thing or something from way back in the day that you didn't even realize was in there. This will maybe kind of show that, which is super cool. And finally, the REST playground. So this is available on both, as I'll cover in a little bit. It's a little more useful in enterprise than standard, but still, really good. All right. So what do you get with enterprise that you don't get on standard? So this isn't a super long list necessarily, but these are pretty critical, important things. And I'm just going to kind of go down the line here. So the first one is that it can be provisioned in production environments on J2EE environments. So, and this is kind of a licensing thing, because both run on the same engine. You can, in a non-production scenario, put standard on many J2EE environments. We don't necessarily recommend it, as like I said, you can't really put that in production. Enterprise is the only version that's really licensed to do this in production. full stop. This means that if you're using something like Command Box, which is an Ortus product, which is really awesome and I love it, if you're using Command Box to actually prop things up in production, you must be using enterprise licensing. I'm sorry. Supporting clustering and load balancing, and what I mean by that is supporting that both internally through there's a variety of like admin, ColdFusion admin things that allow you to do that, as well as supporting it from a licensing standpoint, like putting ColdFusion behind other load balancers in a production environment. I'm sorry, I said I wouldn't talk about licensing, but these things do come up. So that's another one that is really, that enterprise is really the only thing that supports that. If you even look in standard, those like server clustering, it's not even there. Capability to leverage sticky sessions, just kind of out of the box. Again, that's an enterprise only thing. So enterprise also includes the API manager. And the API manager is an awesome tool, a little bit of a learning curve to use it. And I highly recommend, we have one-day trainings that are being done throughout the year by a couple of our trusted partners. There's times both in European India time as well as in North America time. So you should be able to find a time that works really well. And they do talk about how to use the API manager fairly extensively in there to build endpoints, because, you know, ColdFusion is really awesome at that, right? So that is an enterprise only feature. You will not get the API manager with standard. Now, did I miss something? I'm just like realizing, oh, you know what I didn't talk about is the performance monitoring tool set. Let me just go back a little bit there. That's something that does come with both. So this is a big difference. So the API manager only enterprise, the performance monitoring toolkit, which, you know, basically lets you see how things are performing, how much memory everything is using, any like long-standing queries that are taking too long. That is available in both products. Okay, so and that's something I highly recommend people set up, use. If you're having issues with it, please contact us. We'll get you set up and running. It is definitely worth a little bit of effort to get it running. Back to enterprise only though, another enterprise only feature, and this is a little bit of an interesting one. So the code analyzer is something that specifically works with CFBuilder, which is our IDE specifically designed for ColdFusion. However, as many of you are typing furiously at this point, you might know CFBuilder has not been updated since 2018. There is no CF 2021 builder. Why? Because we are on the cusp of releasing a CFBuilder, not the final name, extension for VS Code. I've seen it, I use it. It's there, it's rad, it's going to be a game changer for a lot of people, but it's not out yet. So this is sort of like a balancing point. You either have to use an old CFBuilder to leverage the code analyzer, and the code analyzer does a lot of really cool things. It goes through and it tries to find like OWASP issues, right? Like security issues. It just kind of just gives you a lot of really good insight into what your code is doing. And that's good for anyone. Like, you really want to have sort of like a unbiased look at how your code is actually structured and designed. And so it does do that. This feature will be available with the new VS Code. I don't know if it will still be limited to enterprise. I believe the last answer I got was yes. I've been fighting for it to not be limited. We'll see where that goes, because I do think this is something that everyone should have. That's my personal opinion. And I'm trying to convince the powers that be that it's a good idea. Anyway, next enterprise only feature, distributed caching support. So we talked earlier about just like user sessions, right? Like user sessions getting pumped up to Redis. You can also, however, take a variety of caches and put them into other distributed systems to pull some of the load off of your main machine. And we support Redis, we support cache, we support Memcache, I think is like the default, which is local, I believe. So we support a number of those, and this is again something that like most of us don't really need. It requires architecture. It requires you to write code in a very particular way. And it requires, like, if you really need this, you really need this. Like, you are just getting hammered constantly, and you need to pull load off of your CPU or it's going to burn to dust, right? So this is, again, an enterprise-only feature. And if you need something like that, you're probably going to need load balancing, clustering, all of the other stuff that enterprise. So those things kind of Lego click into each other pretty well. And then the last one on this page for enterprise-only features, this is kind of a funny one to me, is database drivers for like pretty old school databases. And I hope I don't get like hit in the head with a beach ball for saying this, but like DB2, there's a few others that I was looking through and I'm like, I have not heard or used of any of these in quite a very long time. So those are really still just available on enterprise, and the reason should be clear. Those old databases, they tend to be used by very, very large enterprises or government, where they just simply don't have the capability to pull that data out of that old database. I actually worked for a group that had a database that I don't remember the name, but essentially had been around since the 70s or something like that. And to write queries, you actually had to compile an executable and run it against it. It was, anyway, super fun. So part of my project, they were actually pulling all of that into SQL Server, and good Lord, for like the 3 years that I was there, it still didn't get done in 3 years. So you could well imagine if you've got, and I don't know how much data we had. It was, gigabytes, but not terabytes. Some of these government organizations, they have many, many terabytes, maybe petabytes of information on these giant things. So we understand if you need that sort of access, you're probably going to be using enterprise, and you're probably going to, still try to connect to it and pull that over. Maybe you're doing a conversion. That would be great. Now, I don't know how much longer we'll have those in there, but we'll see. Okay, we talked earlier about some email features and functions, right? So you want to send email, and I mentioned that there are some differences. So the difference here is if you have standard and you need to send an email, everything works exactly the same. You're just sending one email. If you're sending two at the same time, what will happen on standard is they will get queued one after another, and one will send, and then the second will send. It's single threaded, okay? In enterprise, we allow you to spin up actually as many threads as you want to have the email be sent out, okay? Generally speaking, this is not usually a problem, because how many emails are you sending out? And a lot of people are not necessarily using things like what's that group that it's not an email service. Like, people aren't running email services, hopefully. Like, they're not sending out thousands and thousands of emails per hour all the time. And so this might not be as big a deal. However, sometimes you do have to send out a few hundred at a time. And if you have to stack those into a line, that's not super great, right? So enterprise allows you to spin up a bunch of threads, get them all out at the same time, and then they collapse back down. You use a bunch of memory, a bunch of CPU, yada yada. But hey, you're running enterprise, so you probably have multiple cores. You probably have a lot of RAM on it as well. So that's probably great. Document handling features that are different. So these are some very, very specific things, but also very important potentially if you need them. So DDX, what in the world is DDX? A lot of people are asking. So DDX is metadata in XML format for PDF. If you've never heard of that, not surprised. People who know, though there are very specific use cases which require you to be able to edit and move things around in DDX. It's very important if you need it. And by the way, if you're planning on taking the certification, you should read up on DDX, because we have like way too many questions about DDX in there. I apologize. At the time, it seemed good, but I think when someone took it the other day, they had 4 questions on DDX, and they were like, why so many? It's randomized, apologies, but they are in there, so that's important to know. Again, parallelization for processing for document generation. If you are generating documents, and by the way, this includes, you know, pretty much anything that's being output. So PDFs, if you're generating PDFs or converting PDFs, if you're doing spreadsheets, so saving out to you know, XLS or anything like that, any type of thing where you're actually generating a document that ends up getting, you know, sent either to a server or out to the user, either case, Enterprise allows you to do that in as many threads as you need to handle them, and we do allow you to tune that if you want, if you don't want to just, you know, totally take your entire server down, because PDF generation is probably one of the, if not the most CPU intensive thing that ColdFusion does, unless your code is really awful like mine. But generally speaking, that's the one that really hits the server. And so if you need that power and you need that kind of parallel processing capability, you have to be running Enterprise, full stop. So, and those are some of the tags that are affected: CF document, CF PDF, CF HTML to PDF, and of course CF spreadsheet, which you can also use to create spreadsheets. Now, I mentioned earlier a little bit of tuning. So if you have performance questions about the two things, and I said earlier, oh yeah, well, you know, in just general terms, they're exactly the same. That's true. They're based on the same engine. However, in Enterprise, we give you more knobs to turn to tune, like, for example, your API requests, your WebSocket requests. Those things are all individually tunable, so that if you're getting hit in one place and want to limit somewhere else because you feel like that's taking your server down or whatever it is, in Enterprise, you can tune each of those separately. In Standard, you have one setting for all of them. It's a, you know, overarching broad brush kind of thing, because generally speaking, if you're using Standard, that's really all that you need. You don't need to tune it quite so down to the wire. But that can make a big difference in performance. It really can. So also in Standard, there is a maximum, and I want to say it's 10, but don't quote me on that. There's a maximum of like 10 threads that can be active at one time. That's the max that you can set. I believe you can lower it maybe. And that's just threads everywhere. And again, this doesn't apply to threaded documents or emails. Those are locked at one thread. But when you're doing like CF thread, for example, and spinning out threads to do a bunch of, you know, number processing or ETL or whatever, and then come back and get the data, Standard has a limit. Enterprise does not. And again, it's because you can run Enterprise on like big, monster, beefy, massive machines, and Standard you really can't, which leads me kind of to the final Enterprise only feature, which is, and again, apologies, licensing. You're able to run it on 8 cores legally. That's on one machine, by the way. That's important to know. If you have 2 4-core machines, you do need 2 licenses. Standard is limited to just the 2 cores. So again, that's a performance capability issue. If you need something that needs to like leverage more than 2 cores, you need to go with Enterprise. That's what's going to get you there. Awesome. Well, that's my talk. I hope everyone enjoyed it. This page has a lot of contact information for me, and please do reach out. I love to hear from folks that come to my my seminars and webinars. My email is takata@adobe.com, TAKATA, super easy. My Twitter is @MarkTakata, so ping me on there, send me fun memes. My Twitch, which every Wednesday at 1 p.m. I actually do a Twitch stream called Fool Around and Find Out, where I kind of mess around inside of ColdFusion and do some really fun things there. My GitHub is Mark R. Takata, and I have code samples from a variety of places, usually from my webinars, but also from my talks. My LinkedIn is up there. Definitely get a hold of me there. I'm on CFML Slack as Mark Takata, so I'm like entirely online. And I do have office hours actually right here in this particular spot. And you can come see me Mondays, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific. No requirement to tell me ahead of time or whatever. Just drop right in and we'll chat. We'll talk about stuff. It's super fun. It's just kind of casual. Nothing's being recorded or anything along those lines. So with that, are there any questions that folks might have that hopefully I could answer without having to send you off on an email chase? But is there anything that I talked about that wasn't necessarily clear, or are there any things, by the way, also that you saw like as differences between the two products and feel like, oh man, I really wish I could maybe do like a little bit more of N in standard, or I wish we could, you know, do all that? Like, are there features maybe that you're seeing in other frameworks and in other languages that you'd love to see in ColdFusion? We want to hear from you. Like, that is literally why I was hired. I'm here to be a touch point for the community. I want to hear from you. We want to get your input on what ColdFusion can be. Let's build the future of this together. All right, so I got a question from Matthew. Matthew asks, are they going to charge for VS Code? The answer is no. The VS Code Builder plugin will be 100% free. It's not going to be open source. Let me clarify there, meaning because we are including things in there like our language server, which is proprietary information. However, you'll be able to use it for free. And we're also talking about releasing some documentation for the endpoints for the language server if people want to use that to build maybe their own things. So that talk is active right now. I'm a big proponent for that. I think I would love to see, love to see that happen. But the answer is absolutely not. We will not be charging for the VS Code Builder plugin, which is a big difference from, of course, the old IDE, which did have a cost. So should be good there. Awesome. Oh, John Barrett's here. Hey, John. So John is actually hosting the next talk that I'll be doing in, oh gosh, not too many hours over at the Hawaii ColdFusion user group. Thanks for coming by, John. Nice to see you. Will the VS Code plugin allow for line-by-line debugging like cfBuilder did? Matthew asks. The answer is yes. We are going to put all of the features of the old builder into the VS Code plugin. And let me tell you, that is not easy to do. But we are doing it. I've been kind of playing with the pre-alpha product, and it does a lot of really cool stuff. It does things that I didn't think a VS Code plugin was capable of doing, and it does it really well. So I'm super excited about that. We are behind, and I apologize in shipping it. We were supposed to ship it in probably December of last year. That slipped to Q1. That slipped to Q2. We're still fixing it. We're still making it really good. And here's the thing: I don't want to release this until I know it's awesome, because I'm one of you. I'm a developer. I'm a coder. I want this to be I want this to be my go-to product. And so for me, it's a really high bar. These guys have got to deliver on it, and I'm holding their feet to the fire on making sure that this thing rocks and is ready for prime time when it gets out. So it's coming soon. Also, in July of this year, we are going to have, again, the Adobe ColdFusion Developer Week. And it's going to be a full week this year of talks. So get yourselves ready. The dates for that are coming up really soon. We will start getting signups for that. We'll start talking about who the speakers are. It's gonna be super cool. So, Brian, hey, it's Brian. Brian, thank you, sir. Thank you, thank you. Awesome. Yes, no, again, I am so excited about the VS Code plugin. Like, if I could fly to India right now and just sit there and go, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, guys, I would totally do that because, you know, what I've already seen excites me. I use it actually already when I do code samples for people. Actually, if little hint, if you want to see what it looks like, show up for my stream on Twitch because guess what? I'm using VS Code to do code while streaming on Twitch, and guess what plugin is running on it? Okay, so if you want to get a super secret squirrel preview of what it looks like, you can catch me on my stream. That's Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, and my Twitch is up there. It's Twitch. Actually, that should be twitch.tv/Mark Takata, not twitch.com. I mean, that one will work, but I don't know what I'm thinking. Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, we're about a minute over. I'm glad folks had a good time. Oh, I think I got a message from someone. Oh, I actually got another. So this is a really good question. Hold on. I apologize for going a little bit over, but someone asked why we stopped building CF Report Builder. And unfortunately, I don't have the answer of why we stopped. However, it has been a really, really big deal in the community, especially over the last year. I've gotten a lot of people coming to me, asking me this very question, you know, why is it no longer supported? Why aren't we doing anything with it? This is important to me. And so the answer, unfortunately, I can't give you the answer of why, because it was sort of shuttered and kind of de-supported long before I came in. But I can tell you, reports are incredibly important for us. We are actively working on trying to find a really good replacement for Report Builder. I don't really have anything solid right now to share, but we are working on it. And we want to keep hearing back from people about this. Tell us that you miss Report Builder. We need to hear this because when we go up to leadership and tell them, you know, hey, we want to build this, we want to bring this in, we want to build this integration, they always ask why, who's going to use it, who's interested in it. And if we can come back and say, look at all of these people that are requesting it, who love this product, who continue to use the old product, even though it's not really supported and doesn't have great, it doesn't have all the great features of the new ColdFusion, then we can actually get this done, get it done faster, get it out to you guys so that you can have an awesome new product that will do all of those things. Yes, Brian. Yes, and this is the kind of thing that I want to hear. Send me emails. You can send me an email that says, please bring back Report Builder. I love to see it. That's actually great. I want that to happen because for a really long time, I think people just maybe used it quietly and it just worked. So we didn't really hear much about it. It's the only theory that works for me because what I'm hearing is this incredible passion from the community about we want Report Builder or a tool that does report building or something because it's incredibly important to our workflow. This is how we do business. And so, yeah, bring it on. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for coming. Chris. Oh, you never deleted any Alaire? Oh, I need to talk to you, Chris, because I might want to see if I can get some of those from you. I've been thinking of like building a historical site for ColdFusion. Oh my God, you do? No way. Okay, Chris, email me, Chris. I want to chat with you. Awesome. Oh, you have it in the box? Oh no, that's beautiful. I love it. Okay, yeah, email me. I want to chat with you. Okay, everyone. Thank you again for coming. Be sure to tune in this afternoon. Well, this afternoon for me anyway, to the Hawaii ColdFusion user group. I'll be talking there about the top 10 issues that you might run into when moving an older code base to a modern ColdFusion thing. It's a lot of fun. It's definitely a little bit lighthearted, and I hope to see a lot of you there. Anyway, thank you again, and I'm gonna log off now and drink my coffee. But thank you.